Welcome to Cure is Curious. I'm Nicole Alafanti, one of the founders and the president of the Coalition for Understanding Racism Through Education. We've been programming here in Larchmont, Emma Marinac, New York since 2018. We're producing this podcast with our local media station, LMC Media. Cure's mission is to educate ourselves and our neighbors about topics that speak to systemic and institutional racism in America. The next several episodes will be about immigration in our country. This topic is front and center on the national stage right now, and also a very prominent issue in our own backyards as we are an immigrant-rich community. Today, we will be talking with Jeffery Feinbloom, a local immigration lawyer. Jeffery is the founding partner of Feinbloom Burdish LLP, a boutique immigration and nationality law firm with offices in Westchester County and Manhattan, a graduate of Northwestern University and the Benjamin N. Cardoza School of Law. Mr. Feinbloom is a nationally recognized expert on U.S. immigration law with 30 years of experience in the field. His firm specializes in both business and family-based immigration, as well as naturalization, removal defense, and federal court litigation. He, close to a decade, was an adjunct professor at the City University of New York, teaching classes on immigration law and naturalization. And his resume is so long that I'm going to stop there, and you can find it on our website after you listen to this podcast. Hello, Jeffery Feinbloom, and thank you so much for giving us your time.
Pleasure to be here, Nicole. Thank you.
So right now, it's kind of an amazing time in our country in terms of immigration, and it's also a frustrating time. Let's start just with a little bit about you. What is your family's immigration story?
Oh, yeah. So my great grandparents on my mother's side came over from Poland and Russia, and I have a copy of the ship manifest from 1906 hanging in my office.
Wow.
And on my father's side, my grandparents came over from, I believe it's Russia and Belarus, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay. So how is immigration different today? I mean, I know we hear that old, like, get online like my great-grandparents did or my great-great-grandparents did. And just briefly, like, how is that line different?
Well, I think what has happened, I'll break that down in two chunks. One is this slow change that's happened over the last 20 years or so, let's say since 9/11, where there's been this cultural shift on immigration. It was never a partisan issue, political issue, and it's become, even before the last year when the second Trump administration took office, it's become much more politicized. But over the course of that time, even since 9/11 up until last January, I often said to people, the law hasn't really changed. There haven't been any meaningful changes in the law. It's just the way that the law is applied in certain respects, and the culture had shifted. What we've seen in the past 14 months has been completely unprecedented. The guardrails are off. The Department of Justice is being poisoned. There is no neutrality in immigration proceedings. There are attacks on both unauthorized and legal immigration. And, what you're hearing in the news is some of the more sensational and egregious stuff, but it literally scratches the surface of what is actually going on with the immigration system, which would shock most people if they understood it, I think.
Okay. I have to take a deep breath after that because now my imagination is off and running. What is the regular, normal quote unquote process to become a naturalized U.S. citizen? I myself don't even know what this means. I have friends who have become citizens or have green cards, but I really have no deep understanding of what that takes. So the normal process to become a naturalized citizen, and about how long does that take?
Sure. So I think the best way to break that down is to understand that, broadly speaking, high level, there are two ways to become a legal resident. which you must be a legal resident, which is having a green card before you can apply for citizenship. So, in order to become legal resident, you generally have to qualify based on a close family relationship, like a spouse, parent, or child, or an offer of employment. There are other ways to qualify for legal residence, but those are the two principal ways that people can get a green card. And then once you've had a green card, generally for 5 years, and you've been a good citizen to be during that time, you can apply for naturalization and become a U.S. citizen.
Okay, so
And,
this process can be years.
yes, absolutely. I mean, processing time really varies depending on the type of case. I mean, it's very complicated once you dig into the family-based categories and the employment-based categories. A relatively straightforward marriage-based case could take 6 months to a year, could also take much longer depending on the circumstances. And a standard employment-based case could take 2 or 3 years and also take longer depending on the circumstances.
Got it. And in the meantime, that person is reporting to legal meetings, right, that they are subject to and checking in with whoever they have to check in with. And that's sort of, there's a standard, there's a process.
There is a process, and that process generally requires filing formal applications with the United States Citizenship and Immigration Service, USCIS. And yeah, it is a process, and that process the laws remain the same again, but how that process is being implemented has come under great stress in the past 14 months.
Got it. So, okay, can an immigrant without lawful status become a U.S. citizen? So, if you didn't come in through a family member or with a job, a visa, a work visa, and what does that process look like?
Sure. Yeah, I mean it's becoming harder and harder. But a person who either entered the country illegally without a visa or entered the country legally and overstayed that visa could, under certain limited circumstances, qualify for a green card. There are affirmative circumstances where someone could apply for a green card, for example, based on marriage to a U.S. citizen. Um, and there are defensive circumstances where people can apply for a green card. That is to say, if they are placed into removal or deportation proceedings, they may be able to qualify for relief from deportation in the form of a green card. For example, if you've been here for more than 10 years, if you don't have any disqualifying criminal conduct, and if you could establish that your removal from the United States would result in extreme and exceptionally unusual hardship to a qualifying relative, which is generally a U.S. citizen, spouse, parent, or child.
Okay.
But that is a very, very high and exacting standard.
Hmm.
And even if you qualify for that relief, which takes years to get to a point where you have a hearing, there is a waiting list for those defensive applications. It's called cancellation of removal. It's really only reserved for the most compelling of cases. And even then, you have to get on a waiting list and wait another 3, 4 years or more before you're actually get a green card.
And so this is, so, Americans who are calling people illegal, like this is a person they would call illegal who's in the middle of this process, who was here, their visa expired, or they came in illegally and now they're in the rotation and it just isn't panning out. They go to their meetings or file their documents. I mean, that is what we're calling an illegal person, right? That,
Yeah, I mean, it depends on who's doing the name calling, right?
right.
It really does depend on who you're talking to. Some people don't like to refer to people who lack documentation as quote unquote illegal
Yes.
at all. And other people will call someone illegal even if they are lawfully present in the United States,
Right.
have a pending application for immigration benefits to formally legalize their status. So it really depends on the context.
Right. And again, we go back to our own ideologies that infuse how we label
Indeed.
people. So a quick question, just is coming out of the blue a little bit for me, but I'm curious. Is do you know what it's like in other countries? Like take Europe, like London, let's say, or England. I'm over there on a work visa. I love it so much. I fall in love. I have to stay. My work visa expires. Like, is it the same process there too?
Yeah, it's definitely not the same process, but I think broadly speaking, you can immigrate to certain country. I mean, every country obviously has their own laws, and I am not an expert in any other country's immigration laws.
Right.
But as a general rule, you could qualify based on family ties. You may be able to qualify based on employment or even occupation. There are certain countries that you could invest a lot of money in and get a green card that way.
Hmm.
In fact, there's a green card investor visa in the United States, but that requires more than just an investment of a certain amount of funds. It's a job creation visa.
Ah,
So you see programs like this in various countries throughout the world.
got it. Okay. Um, how can you stay in the U.S. on humanitarian grounds? So we know there are refugees, there's asylum, there's TPS, and I'm understanding this means like there's an environmental crisis in your country, there's a huge flood, you get flooded out, there's a war, it's just unlivable, and you come here. How do you get to stay here?
Yeah, so you've hit on three of the main programs, the asylum program, the refugee program, and the TPS program. And this is maybe exhibit A of how legal immigration has come under attack. And the government has arbitrarily ended TPS for virtually every country that has had it. There are legitimate points that the government raises that TPS, temporary protected status, means just that. It's temporary. And there are countries whose nationals have been on TPS for over 20 years because of conditions. And I don't want to digress too much, but a lot of times conditions that were created by the United States and our interventions in these countries,
Mm-hmm.
El Salvador, Guatemala, countries like that, Haiti, combined with certain natural events, catastrophic earthquakes, war, to the extent you could call that a national event. But the manner by which the current administration has terminated those TPS programs um, is largely illegal, has been deemed illegal by most of the courts who have considered the merits of these challenges. But our Supreme Court has weighed in unprecedented fashion on a number of subjects, including TPS, that has allowed the government's terminations to go forward in certain circumstances, pending the outcome of litigation to challenge those programs on the merits. Uh, it's all pretty complicated stuff,
Yeah.
but it is a true front line right now in the battle between this administration and advocates.
Yeah, and I don't think it would be an unworthy digression if maybe you explained a tiny bit about what you said in the beginning of your answer, which is, often America is dancing with some of these countries and things happen and then it creates circumstances that make people want to flee. I mean, can you give like a simple example of that? I can't think of one because I'm ignorant.
Yeah, I mean, really, and this is going back into the 1980s, but like our aggressions and interventions into a lot of countries in Central America, for instance. But of course, that didn't directly lead to TPS. There may have been TPS programs back then, but the earliest TPS programs that are on the books are from, I believe, 1999 and 2000 that remain on the books. But I'm not that is not my area of expertise,
Right, right.
so
Yeah.
I don't feel like too qualified to get into the history of that. But there are other humanitarian programs, to seek emergency medical treatment. There's something called parole. That's a statutory tool that Congress has enacted to vest discretion in immigration officials to temporarily allow people to enter for urgent humanitarian reasons, that has largely just been completely frozen by the current administration. So
Hmm.
it is an intentional way of our government saying to the rest of the world, basically, you are no longer welcome here. Um, that is eh, the not so subtle messaging.
Right, which was always the opposite. We were bring me you're tired, you're hungry, and you're poor.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep.
So, how you've said this a little bit. How have immigration policies changed under the second Trump administration? I know. Well, so there's policies and there's enforcement. Maybe we want to talk about both of those things, starting with
Sure.
policies.
I would even back up and say that before there are policies, there are laws, right? Like Congress is in charge of making the laws. Congress enacts the immigration statute along with statutes in every area of law and the the administration of federal government, immigration among them. The Immigration and Nationality Act, there hasn't been a meaningful amendment to that act, a substantive amendment to that act, really since 1996. There have been little tweaks here and there. They created the Department of Homeland Security that amended the Immigration Act in 2002 following 9/11. But substantively, the immigration laws really haven't changed. What's changed is how those laws are applied. And like, as you said, the policies, there's policy that is based on the laws, where immigration officials have great leeway in terms of how to interpret those laws in certain circumstances, and they develop policies that become official through the agency's policy manual. And then there's implementation. And what is really striking in terms of the last 14 months is how, even though the laws haven't changed, policy has changed and implementation has changed dramatically to the point where even the most hardened immigration practitioner, couldn't really have anticipated everything that's happened and is happening right now.
Okay, so then that brings us to enforcement, which obviously policies and laws are enforced, and we've seen a huge turn in the way the agency we call ICE is conducting itself. From what I understand, many of those initial folks were fired, new recruits came in, and our administration is talking to them in a different way and giving them immunity to conduct this sort of aggressive enforcement that they've been doing. We see it on our streets. 2 people have been killed. I mean, there's probably many who've been killed, but two
Yeah,
people,
more than two for sure.
Americans who were, supporting their immigrant neighbors. So maybe you can talk a little bit about what we're seeing there.
Yeah, I mean, I think everything that you said is true. I mentioned earlier the guardrails are off. I'm certainly not present in these recruitment meetings, but I have seen some of the recruitment tools. They are actually one of the most disturbing things is the recruitment, well, the firing and recruitment of new immigration judges. They literally have marketing materials that call them deportation judges.
Mm.
I mean, I think it goes without saying that when someone is in a deportation proceeding, they are supposed to get a hearing before a neutral arbiter to determine their right to remain in the United States. And what is happening at the Department of Justice and immigration judges are Department of Justice officials. They're not actual federal court judges. They are part of the executive branch of government, not the judicial branch,
Hmm.
but they're still supposed to be neutral. So that's one way in which that the process is being corrupted in a pretty egregious manner,
Mm-hmm.
where you have the administration's enforcement and deportation agenda colliding with the supposedly neutral system to determine whether people have the right to remain in the United States.
Hmm.
Then, so there's that aspect of the enforcement regime that is not getting a lot of attention in the news. What is understandably getting a lot of attention in the news is the immigration enforcement on the streets of America by ICE, which is the sub-agency of the Department of Homeland Security that is responsible for internal immigration enforcement. And the messaging is clear. Detain, arrest, detain, and sort it out later.
Mm.
ICE has never been known as an immigrant-friendly law enforcement agency, but they generally followed the law, or at least tried to follow the law, or at least the official policy of the agency was to follow the law. That is no longer the case, as evidenced by hundreds of court decisions in the habeas corpus context. And I don't do a lot of this type of work, but I, am inundated on a daily basis through the various listservs that I'm on. It's something that is a daily presence and occurrence in my practice, even though it's not a big part of my practice in terms of what I do substantively. But you have, hundreds of district court decisions rejecting the unlawful detention of non-citizens over the past, 6 to 9 months. And these are the people that can afford or have access to lawyers. I mean, there are thousands and thousands of cases that don't make it to the courts.
Right. So can you explain what habeas corpus is? From what I
Sure.
understand, yeah, please.
Yeah, the ancient writ. Habeas corpus is Latin for produce the body. So it's a legal challenge to someone who has been unlawfully detained by government officials under color of law. So if you claim that your detention violated statute or constitutional laws, then you could bring a petition for a writ of habeas corpus. It is supposed to be adjudicated on an expedited basis, and the courts in New York, specifically in the Southern and Eastern District, are adhering to that. They've been incredibly responsive, reacting in a matter of hours, in most cases, to petitions that are filed for people who have allegedly been unlawfully detained. But then you have other areas of the country where you have judges sitting on these cases for weeks and even months before issuing any kind of preliminary orders.
Wow.
So really does make a big difference on where you live.
Yeah. I read in a ProPublica article that, there are about 200 cases a day being put before courts. And I think in Minnesota alone, there were like 12 filings in 2024, and now there's been over 700. This must do so much to the people who have to manage these things.
Oh yeah.
In addition to the families. I mean,
Yeah.
I think we
It
think
stresses the system in every
yeah,
way, from the judges and their clerks to handle. They're not equipped. They don't have the resources to handle this. Immigration lawyers are being inundated and having to compartmentalize. Even U.S. attorneys who are overburdened and overworked and are literally violating court orders intentionally or unintentionally at astonishing rates. I mean, there are court decisions cropping up all over the country with reports of Department of Justice attorneys who have violated court orders, which is traditionally unthinkable.
yeah, yeah. I think, it's like I hear our language as we're speaking, like we say ICE, we say, judges, we say immigrants, and these are individual people with lives. And it
No doubt.
seems like such an avalanche of just unbelievable kind of stress on everyone's part. I mean, I actually was
And
even.
for what?
And for what? Right. I
For
was
what?
listening to a Pulitzer Prize winning journalist talk to Ezra Klein. Her name's Caitlin Dickerson, and she's been steeped in the whole ICE situation and talking to them. And from what I understand, what she explained was that, ICE has been kind of like this stepchild of enforcement, and they're always been kind of like the underdog in terms of that. And now here you have people, ICE agents, who are obeying the laws. The thing's been turned upside down. They look like a bunch of vigilantes. And, just for a second, to even have a little compassion for those guys who are like, we were doing our jobs, and now this is a kind of like a hot mess, that we're part of. And I don't think people who are doing their jobs want to be part of something this insane and out of control,
Yeah, a lot of people don't, but a lot of people I think are really on board with it all.
Yeah,
And
oh yes, the new yeah,
the
yeah.
notion that this is that they are targeting the worst of the worst, right,
Yes.
is belied
Yes.
by the facts. It is the most egregious misrepresentation. If they were doing this properly, they would have a lot more support from the American people, and I can't stand that phrase, but I
Right, because
can't
we're
believe I
not a
just used it,
monolith.
but I did. If they were truly targeting the worst of the worst,
Sure.
that would have broad support. And in fact, one could argue that that's what this administration was elected to do.
Yeah.
But the manner in which they are doing it, and you see this in other areas, not to get too off topic, but just, in terms of international relations,
Oh,
it's
it's beyond.
throwing a hand grenade where a scalpel is required.
Yes.
And, even, there are areas where the intent is good, but the way that it is being carried out is just an
No,
atrocity.
absolutely. And I want to be clear, I was trying to make the point that the new recruits and the messaging, especially from the administration, from Stephen Miller, with this, get out there, whip it up, and you'll be immune, is
Yep.
drawing a certain type of person. I'm sure the folks some of them who had been involved before, are feeling like this is not what they signed up for. So
A
that
lot of
that
those
was my
people have
point.
left. A
Yeah,
lot of those people have left, and the
absolutely.
current leadership is like, see ya, don't let the door, kick you on the way out. And,
Sure.
and that's scary.
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
You
if
know,
you look at all the people who are magnetized to what's going on, you got a couple of cases there. But anyway,
yeah.
so that's a general. So what are some of the cases you're handling? Is there anything typical? I mean, I'm sure they're also nuanced, but is there stuff that you're facing right now that you just never thought you would see?
Yes.
Okay.
I mean, there is. My practice these days is primarily business immigration. I represent a lot of companies, a lot of startups in the technology sector, and help those companies and their employees gain and or retain their legal status, work visas, green cards. I still do a lot of family immigration, so a typical case in the employment context would be helping a company get a new hire a work visa. A typical case in the family context would be a US citizen marries a foreign national and wants to sponsor that person for a green card. And in each of these cases, there can be all kinds of nuance. Then there are, the unusual cases that are filled with nuance that, I handle a lot of. Certain deportation cases. I dabble in the habeas field. I've handled a couple of habeas cases with, pretty remarkable fact patterns. Even in the employment context, I'll, be I've had multiple consultations in the last week that present very unusual fact patterns and scenarios that require a lot of creativity to navigate. So,
Mm.
it keeps me on my toes, that's for sure.
Mm-hmm. Well, that brings me to, I guess, first, how are you doing? Number one.
Mm.
And also, in addition to the psychological and even economic toll that you're seeing on immigrants and their families, I mean, in prolonged detention and having to manage these cases. I mean, in general, really, how are you? How do you take care of yourself while you're doing this work? And what are you seeing? Because, we have an immigrant rich community here. And I think every day about how scared and just tired people must be right now.
Yeah, so that's a great question. And it really is a crisis that everybody is just dealing with. And I'm sure there'll be a lot of fallout for when hopefully the dust settles. But right now, I think for me, it's really all about compartmentalization.
Mm.
My next door neighbor here at work is a psychologist, and I ran into him in the hallway the other day, and we just kind of, it was a very brief but very knowing interaction about
Mm-hmm.
like, what you have to do. And, keep your eye on the ball, keep your head down at work, compartmentalize, do what you could do, get to work, and never lose sight of what's most important, and that's your family, your family's well-being, your own well-being. I mean, it's definitely a challenge. It's a tremendous challenge. I'm also on the board of a local nonprofit that I'm spending, a pretty fair amount of time on in recent months, and that enables me to sort of, you know, do my job and earn a living and focus on my family, but also give back to the community, independent of my, vocation. I mean, it's related, the work, but it's independent, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it helps me compartmentalize, and because you get a sense as an immigration lawyer, like you have a duty to your client. You have to do the best you can and zealously advocate for that client. But as a humanitarian in the current environment, I, I feel like I am not and can never do enough.
Yeah.
And that could be dangerous
Yeah.
if it bleeds into your ability to zealously advocate for the people that you have been retained to advocate for and that you have a duty to advocate for. It can be dangerous if that's impacting your family or personal life.
Yeah.
So for me personally, the way that I deal with that is I, am trying to give back to the community by serving on the board of this organization and feeling that I'm making a difference, in my local community, in addition to trying to help my clients the best I can.
Yeah, that's incredible, and I'm grateful for you. And I think I think that's a great segue to just for someone who's a lawyer but not an immigration lawyer and might want to help right now, or for a regular citizen who's like, this is so overwhelming. I love, my immigrant community. What do I do? What can people do? I feel like it's a numbers thing, right? It shouldn't be 100 people. It should be a million people, because then it takes the
Yeah.
weight off the 100 people, So
Yep.
what are the small things you can do even from your couch?
Yeah, I'm really glad you asked that question because it's so vital, because I think that, we're humans, right? So if something isn't impacting your life directly, you have enough, can I say shit? Enough
Yeah.
shit to worry about in your life. So like you might really, really care about what's going on and what's happening to immigrants in, across the United States in particular, and particularly inside your community, but you're just dealing with the other 150 things that are impacting your life on a
Yeah.
daily basis.
Yeah.
So I think that what you can do is, if you have time, give your time. If you have money, give your money. Do something to get involved to try to make a difference. And don't feel as though you have the weight of the world on you, right? Or try not to.
Yeah.
But if you want to make a difference, there are so many ways that you can make a difference. You know, talk to people.
Yeah. No, and that's so
Try to
honest.
organize,
Yes. Yes.
volunteer.
Yes.
Like I said, give money, give your time. You know, just get involved and educate yourself.
Yeah, the opportunities are really endless. There are plenty in our backyard. We are going to
Indeed.
put those on our website. There always will be resources and actions after every interview. Jeffrey Feinbloom, you're an amazing human being. Thank you so much for your time and for everything you do. We're really honored to have you here today, and I hope we get to talk again.
Thanks, Nicole. It's been a pleasure. I really appreciate that.
Thank you. For those listening, this is Cure is Curious. Thank you for being with us. I'm Nicole Alifanti. This podcast was produced at LMC Media with studio manager Astrid Rivera. The outgoing music was written by me and my friend Carrie Hopwood. And we will have resources at learnwithcure.com. Stay curious.